architecture designed for transition, for the moment between departure and arrival, when people existed in suspension, committed to leaving, but not yet delivered to their destination. A woman sat 3 rows from where Elias stood, which was somehow both entirely visible and utterly unnoticed by every other person in the terminal, as if he occupied a fold in perception, present but imperceptible. She was perhaps 30, perhaps 40. One of those individuals whose age was obscured by the weight of experience rather than revealed by physical markers. Her luggage consisted of 2 bags, one large enough to hold a life compressed to essentials, one small enough to qualify as carry-on, positioned at her feet with the particular attention people pay to possessions that represent everything they own. Her hands were folded in her lap, but not still. Her fingers moved constantly, restless, rehearsing motion without purpose, burning nervous energy that had nowhere else to go. Elias recognized the signs immediately. He had seen them before in his consulting work, had learned to read the physical vocabulary of people under stress. Jaw clenched, shoulders raised, breathing shallow. Fight or flight responses activated but with nowhere to direct their energy. The body preparing for action, while the mind locked in indecision. She was deciding whether to leave. The presence that resolved beside her was not dramatic. No one else in the terminal reacted, continued about their business of waiting, reading, staring at phones, existing in that peculiar public solitude that characterizes transit spaces. But Elias saw it. Not clearly, not with the definition his eyes insisted reality should possess, but sufficiently. A figure that suggested, rather than declared itself, masculine in implication, but not necessarily in substance. Present in the way that background music is present, ignorable until one pays attention, then impossible not to notice. Agares. The Warden of Movements did not speak, but the woman's breathing changed, deepened. Her shoulders dropped fractionally, the tension bleeding away by degrees so subtle Elias would have missed them if he weren't watching, with the trained observation of someone who had spent his career noticing the smallest shifts in institutional behavior. She looked at her phone, checking something, schedule perhaps, or directions, or one final message from whoever she was leaving behind. Agares did not move, but space around the woman seemed to open, to create clearance, to suggest that departure was not just possible, but natural, that leaving was simply the next logical step in a sequence that had already been set in motion by choices she had made before arriving at this terminal. Elias watched carefully, documenting mentally the way influence was being applied. Not coercion, he was certain of that. Coercion would have been visible in her body language, would have manifested as increased tension, resistance, the physical vocabulary of someone being pushed. This was different. This was facilitation, the subtle removal of obstacles, the quiet erosion of reasons to stay. An announcement crackled over the terminal's PA system, boarding call for a bus heading west, away from the city, towards smaller towns and emptier landscapes. The woman stood, decision made, and collected her bags with movements that were almost relieved, as if grateful that the moment of choice had finally resolved itself, that she could stop holding herself in suspension and simply move. As she walked toward the boarding gate, Agares' presence faded, not departing so much as ceasing to be necessary, its function complete. The Office of Record Compliance's voice emerged in Elias's awareness.
Observation complete. Assessment.
Elias took a breath, organizing his thoughts with the discipline of someone who had written thousands of professional evaluations, who knew that precision in language mattered, that the difference between similar words could mean the difference between accurate documentation and useful fiction.
Influence was present but not coercive,
he said quietly, speaking to the empty space where the officer's attention seemed focused.
The subject's decision appeared to be her own, but the context was adjusted. Obstacles removed, not through material intervention, but through perception. She felt that leaving was easier than staying, not because she was pushed, because the path of least resistance was subtly engineered to point toward departure. And the constraint.
The office pressed. Elias considered.
Non prohibere, non suadere. To neither prevent nor persuade, technically maintained. The office did not prevent departure, nor did it explicitly persuade. But
facilitation is a form of persuasion,
Elias concluded.
Not direct, not explicit, but influential nonetheless. If the constraint's intent is that departure should be entirely the subject's choice, uninfluenced by external forces, then the spirit of the constraint was compromised, even while its letter was observed.
Silence followed his assessment. Not immediate agreement or disagreement, but the particular quality of silence that suggested his observation had been noted, recorded, added to whatever accumulated analysis the office maintained.
Your assessment will be appended to the record.
The office said, finally.
A second observation is required before conclusions can be formalized. The Office of Bifrons maintains adjacent jurisdiction. Observation is scheduled to occur in 4 days. You will be notified.
The terminal folded away, and Elias's kitchen reasserted itself as his primary reality. He stood exactly where he had been standing before, the coffee pot still warm in his hand, the book still open on the table. According to the clock on his microwave, no time had passed. Not suspended, simply unspent, as if his observation had existed outside the normal flow of temporal sequence. He set the coffee pot down, with hands that were almost steady, and sat heavily in his chair, feeling the adrenaline that had sustained him through the observation beginning to metabolize, leaving behind the particular exhaustion that follows intense focus. The book remained open, but now a new annotation had appeared beneath the entry for Agares, written in script that was unmistakably his own. Though he had no memory of writing it, observation, subject facilitated toward departure through environmental adjustment, constraint maintained in letter, compromised in spirit, technical compliance achieved, functional deviation noted. Below his words, in that precise inhuman hand he had come to associate with the office itself, a single line appeared. Assessment accepted. Audit continues. Elias closed his eyes and took a long, slow breath. This was going to be more complicated than he had anticipated. But then again, systems always were.